You may have heard about how Ohio's Republican Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, had promised to exclude Joe Biden, who is the sitting president of the United States, from the ballot in Ohio in November because he would be nominated at the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, which wouldn't happen until after the state's deadline, which created a problem in that the sitting president wouldn't be on the ballot in the state of Ohio, where some obscure state law would set a strict deadline for political parties to certify their presidential nominees, or else they won't appear on the state's general election ballot. So the deadline for political parties to certify their candidates to appear on the Ohio ballot is August 7th, about a week and a half earlier than the Democratic nominating convention. And by the way, this has happened before, but Ohio passed temporary extensions to its certification deadline for Barack Obama and Mitt Romney in 2012 and for Donald Trump in 2020. But that's not how Republicans play ball in 2024 because, not big fans of democracy anymore. That's right, because in 2024, everything is apparently an opportunity for a partisan power play in the GOP. States have almost always offered a quick solution to ensure that major presidential candidates, including the sitting president of the United States, would remain on the ballot. A legislative fix, which could have pushed back the certification deadline, stalled out earlier this month as Republicans in the Ohio Senate slipped in legislative poison pills, which were unrelated amendments that would make it so no Democrat would vote for the bill. These poison pill amendments would essentially grant the state GOP leaders with more legal power while limiting voters' ability to be heard. One of these, for example, was to ban out-of-state money in state ballot initiatives, which Republicans in Ohio blamed for the passage of last year's constitutional amendment enshrining abortion access into the state's constitution. As if the problem was the money that paid for TV ads so that people knew about the Republicans' draconian agenda and not the Republicans' draconian agenda itself. Last week, the Ohio General Assembly adjourned without finding a legislative solution to the ballot issue, and Ohio's Republican Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, was fully prepared to block President Biden from the ballot over this minor procedural issue, which is why the DNC will now meet virtually before the August 7th deadline so that they can officially nominate Biden as the party's nominee and guarantee that he'll appear on every voter's ballot and ensure Ohioans can vote for their presidential candidate of their choice. To be clear, the DNC will still happen in Chicago in person at the end of August, but the virtual convention will now happen in addition to that convention, all to satisfy the unnecessary whining of a partisan hack in Ohio who decided to throw a temper tantrum over an absolute non-issue, because that's what this Secretary of State is focused on. Ohio voters should know that their tax dollars are hard at work. And I know what critics will say. Democrats tried to keep Trump off the ballot, and yet now they get upset when Republicans do the same? Only this isn't even close to the same thing. Democrats who tried to keep Donald Trump off the ballot were adhering to the plain text of the Constitution. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment prohibits insurrectionists from holding federal office. Donald Trump incited an insurrection. A judge in California found as much, a judge in Colorado found as much, even the state Supreme Court in Colorado found as much. Our current far-right Supreme Court aside, it is clear across the judiciary that Donald Trump disqualified himself from appearing on the ballot, regardless of the impotence of certain judges currently sitting on the nation's highest court. So regardless of any false equivalencies that conservatives may shoehorn into the conversation, no, Trump and Biden are not the same. And that's a point, by the way, that my Democracy Watch co-host Mark Elias discussed here. Do you think that attempts like these are kind of retribution for Democrats rightly employing a system intended to keep insurrectionists off the ballot in accordance with the 14th Amendment?
I think that there's an element of Republicans that would say that that's what it is. That, essentially they would say Democrats tried to keep Trump off the ballot, so we're doing this. I think that is, first of all, there's no comparing. It's really apples and oranges. One involved the former president in inciting an insurrection in the nation's capital to try to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. The second involves literally the DNC working in cooperation with the RNC to make sure the two conventions are spaced out properly. Yeah. So it's a crazy analogy to draw, but I also kind of don't buy it. I think the Republicans are going to test that fence regardless of what the Democrats do. Like, they're not going to operate in good faith. And I think that we just sort of, in one sense, I think we kind of need to take this as an opportunity to internalize that. Like, there's no norm that Donald Trump will abide by because he feels like, I owe that to the Democrats to operate in good faith. They will operate in bad faith if they see any advantage to do so.
So look, if the Biden campaign had sued in Ohio for ballot access, there is a good chance that they would have prevailed. But to look back at the Trump example, it took 6 months of legal wrangling before the court put that issue to bed. We don't have months. Voters will begin casting their ballots as early as September. Although I should note that wasting time and money on nonsensical fights is exactly what the GOP wants Democrats to be doing. And this is part of a pattern, wherein from top to bottom, Republicans' sole interest is in consolidating power for themselves. In 2022, they won back the House, effectively taking control of the government, and squandered it with useless investigations into Hunter and Joe Biden that went nowhere. They haven't done anything to lower costs, to add jobs, to make healthcare more affordable, to make gas cheaper. It's all just been baseless political attacks in an effort to make Democrats look weak so that they can win in the next election. Just power for the sake of power, all in an effort not to help Americans, but rather to help themselves. That's what they stand for, and that's the message that we all need to drive home before it's too late. Which is a point that Mark again drove home here.
Mark, does the fact that this is happening, does the fact that yet another instance where Republicans could test the fence, does this worry you moving forward that they're figuring out more and more different ways where they can allow themselves to kind of tear down the system in deference to their party or to their political benefit?
Absolutely. Look, let me tell you what has me most worried right now. Is I understand why there is so much interest in the Donald Trump criminal trial in New York. I genuinely do. I mean, I'm interested in it. It's historic. It's all of that. But, they're testing the fence while, frankly, a lot of people are not watching the fence, right? They are watching the TV screen with the 30th talking head talking about what the testimony of David Pecker meant. And in the meantime, things like what we're seeing in Ohio and Alabama take place. The voter suppression that you and I talk about takes place. Like the Republicans are not fixated just on that one thing. They are recruiting 100,000 challengers. Laura Trump went on TV and said, we're going to have our people handling the ballots, right? And that's would be a massive violation of state law. And so I'm worried, candidly, that while we're watching one screen, they've got a whole bunch of screens set up in there, and we've got to make sure we are watching the fence as well.
Yeah, and that's a major reason that I'm appreciative, and I know our audience is appreciative of being able to talk to you about this stuff, because I actually do think that we kind of deride the crazies in that party, the Donald Trumps and the Carrie Lakes and the Marjorie Taylor Greens, but I think that the more serious and pernicious folks in the Republican Party kind of understand that those people redound to their benefit, because while all eyes are trained on Marjorie Taylor Greene doing her circus act in the parking lot of Congress, they can get away with doing the stuff that Steve Bannon is trying to get through, trying to push through, efforts to harass poll workers and election vigilantism and voter suppression and reducing the number of precincts in minority majority communities and on. And so I think this kind of ecosystem, they've figured out a way to rely and need the crazies in that party, because it gives them cover to do what they need to do under the cloak of darkness.
Yeah, and this is actually a very smart point you made to me, so I want to give you credit. I asked the question several weeks ago, going back now, why would the RNC, at the same time that it's hiring Charlie Spees, who is a well-respected, lawyer, and, brought in Bill McGinley to be their outside counsel, who, worked in the Trump administration, but, has a long pedigree as a lawyer. Why would they also have brought in Christina Bobb, right? Doesn't that undercut the message? And I think your basic point to me, and this may not have been an episode, this may have been off camera, but your basic point to me is no. Actually, that's the perfect pairing, because she is dealing with elements of the base and the crazies that actually they also want to have going. It's not an either or. Yeah. There's actually a synergy to the two.
So Republicans are making it abundantly clear where they stand. They're not whispering their message, they are blasting it through megaphones. They are demanding that we see who they are, and it's a party that is diametrically opposed to democracy. I've got a really exciting announcement. I've written a book. It's called Shameless. This book explores how Republicans have exploited their historical branding while attacking our democracy, how the media has proven itself a willful participant, and how Democrats can learn from this to rebalance the political scales and save our democracy. It has been a lifelong dream of mine to write my own book, and so I'd like to ask you to pre-order it by clicking the link right here on the screen. And if you buy within this pre-order period, your book is going to come with a signed nameplate. As you know, I've never had a single sponsor on my channel. I don't ask for money or anything like that, but if you're looking for a way to support me, this is hands down the best way to do it. So again, follow the link right here on the screen, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for pre-ordering Shameless. And as always, make sure to subscribe to see more of my content.